everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today guys I want to talk about something that's going to be happening today, but possibly there's not really going to be much said about it, or what is going to be said about it's going to be very negative or very biased. And what I'm on about is this event that's happening on the 7th of September in Glasgow Square, or George Square, where there's going to be the first pro-UK rally, and I think I've seen in probably years. There has been pro-UK events, but they've been nothing significant. And there has been protests against the local SNP government about various things. But I think today, guys, I want to talk about this very one instant here. Because this event, which you see the picture here, isn't just the event for a pro-UK movement, which I would say Scotland sorely needs one, because they just don't do it. It's actually part of Enough is Enough protest, which has connections to the riots that we saw almost a month ago in England, where the three young girls were stabbed and killed, and there were other people that was injured as well. But these three girls died from their injuries from a Nigerian man, or child, as you call it, but whatever. And that caused absolute outrage, with parts of the outrage with misinformation, and probably what would have caused of many, many years of the people getting sick and tired of the government not actually caring about the indigenous people of the country, and England themselves, where the indigenous people of England aren't actually getting listened to by the government at all. Now, what this has to do with Scotland is sort of similar, but not in the same way. When it comes to politics in Scotland, it's a little bit different. Scotland's mostly left wing by default, but this event that has been organised by a man called Glasgow Cabby, which is very known for having protests organised against the SNP's policies, has finally done an event for the Enough is Enough protest, where the words of Lord Voldemort might show up, and we'll talk about that later. But what's the significance of this event is that it's actually the first anti-immigration and anti-illegal immigration protest in Scotland to probably for a while, or even maybe since the 90s or the 70s. Because, to be honest, most of the time in Scotland, there's actually never been really an issue with immigrants or economic standards when it comes to migrants of any sort. Most of the people that come here are from Poland and other places too that share cultural Western values, and there's maybe a few who are from other parts of the world who do actually respect the culture and like it here as well. But there's a minority of people, which all come from these different parts of the world, that do not respect the culture and do not respect the way the people do things or how it should be done. And we do see that ever more and more, especially in England, but in Scotland it's never so much. But in the south, where you got places like Glasgow and Edinburgh and the borders areas, the immigration problem is actually more effective there than it is in other places. And now it's actually starting to affect the identity of Scottish culture as well. But not just Scottish culture, but it's actually affecting what British culture is. Because in Britain, there isn't really a thing... in Scotland, there isn't really a thing called British culture. There are things there, but it's been dominated by nationalists who have been promoting the Scottish message of independence and so on, which have been very, really negative towards the idea of Britishness and people who support the UK, and out of every other name to discredit them whatsoever. But let's go and talk about the event that's going to be happening, because there's a few updates for what's happening today. I'll read what's actually in this picture here, the Pro-UK Rally. I first have to say about the title of what we're actually going to be talking about, because it is a pro-UK rally, and it's also called an Enough is Enough protest, which has elements of pro-UK rally, fighting against the Anglo-nationalists, and having a serious debate about immigration, which has been a thing in the UK for a while now. Anyway, stand together to protect the country. Be at George Square, 7th of September, 1 p.m. After careful consideration to maximise the attendance, The date has now been changed to join other pro-UK rallies. We did not know this was a thing. This will remain peaceful protest and share disgust and fear for the future of the future, sorry. And that's basically what the whole thing is been about. And we've seen many elements of pro-UK movements that's been around the UK and in Scotland too. But I say again, Scotland's a mostly left-wing country, but there's a lot of conservatism values in it that just don't get implemented very much. The first thing I have to say about this whole narrative that came after the news of this event was the amount of propaganda that's been produced by establishment media, just like what happened in after the Enough is Enough protests, where there was so much negative media towards Indigenous English people, Indigenous British people themselves. There was always a one-sided bias when it comes to media coverage. Everything that was pro-UK is far right. Everything that's pro-England, or even the concerns of the protesters that were peaceful, it's just far right. It's Nazis. It's something I can't say on YouTube. It's something like that. And in Scotland, we have this version of it too, where we have socialist nationalists in charge of the country, but keep trying to tell everyone they're not socialist nationalists, but keep promoting themselves as the peaceful good guys. But one of the main people that's been consistent out of the whole narrative of painting what's going to be happening on Saturday or today is The National, which is a pro-independence newspaper, which is independently funded to keep the idea of independence alive. To be honest, it's just sad to see them still churning out worse than The Guardian or CNN could ever do on a daily budget. Honestly, it's funny to see the amount of propaganda they've came out with. I mean, I'm only showing you this picture here where it says independent groups hold protest against far-right rally in Glasgow, where they probably showed the worst version of a pro-British guy, wherever that outside Leeds Town Hall, so they don't even show one from Scotland, which is just ironic. But it shows for what the narrative will be painted as. And that's why I'm going to be going down there myself to actually report and see what's going on. Because this has gained a lot of attention from many socialist and racist groups themselves, such as Stand Up to Racism Scotland, who has actually gone out so far to discredit everything that's getting said to these people, even trying to make as much protest as they can. But to be honest, they've been saying things like, we'll go stand against the far right. There isn't a far right moving in Scotland, but hey ho, if the narrative lie works, what the fuck am I going to argue with? Basically, that's what it is. Don't let the far right divide us. And with every other hashtag group, little thing, to stand up against racism and pro-socialism, pro-Hamas, and all these kind of groups just to promote their agenda, they will do anything. The Socialist Worker Party newspaper even says Scottish anti-fascists geared the protest in Glasgow, despite they're the ones who take over George Square every weekend waving the Palestine flag of another country in Scotland. Almost shows they're more ashamed to be Scottish than Palestinian, but hey ho, where all these leftist socialist outlets have been continuously sharing negative views and negative points about the pro-UK events that's been going on. And I think the only one thing that's been worried about is what's getting said between the people who are pro-UK and pro-against them. Despite what you're seeing here with the post that's coming from against racism and so on, it's basically just a cover for their own racism and their own bigotry of themselves, which is really a shame, but it's kind of funny how they keep going after the people that's supposed to be helping them. But hey ho. So I actually want to talk about this article that came up from the BBC News, which was Robust and Swift Response Plan for Any Rioting in Scotland. And this is Prosecutors say they have swift response if there is any rioting and public disorder in Scotland. The announcement follows of social media by the far right leader. Not quite sure how this works, but I'll call him Lord Voldemort just for the internet safety sake, and YouTube, who said in July the UK peaceful protest would be held in Glasgow this month. An anti-racism rally is being organised in response, which I bet they will be more agitated than ever, and they have been making as much media and publications say anyone who's joining this is far right, they're extremists, they're Nazis, and we have to stop the far right. Well, there's now a far right movement in Scotland. Scotland's prosecution services is instructing police to remand subjects in custody, and cases will be fast tracked through the courts. Of course, they will, because anything the far right gets through the courts much faster than anything actually serious, like a stabbing or anything. Where, by the way, Glasgow had a really bad event of a stabbing a few years ago with a migrant hotel, which was not fun. And everyone just forgot about it. And I think that's actually one of the things that everyone will forget about is this kind of things happen in Scotland all the time, but they just don't get talked about because it just doesn't follow the narrative that well. Because the National would be the leftist media outlet would actually have made so much articles about Lord Voldemort and so much articles about the far right event going on. It's actually funny and mad see how much they're caring about these other things, except for actual things that matter to people. But hey ho. A letter to the Solicitor General of Scotland, Childedness, I don't know, and Audrey Nicholl, MSP, to convert the Scottish Parliament's Criminal Justice Committee commented to the disorder of riots seen in England and Northern Ireland following the killing of 3 young girls in Southport. There was a lot more to it than that simple stabbing. There was a lot of pressure that everyone just ignores. She said the disorder was motivated by hate, racism, and prejudice. Of course, it fucking is. To ensure that the public confidence was maintained and further offended deterred. She said arrest would be expected in man custody appear in court and there's opportunity. Why? Because you've busted up there's so much people since COVID lockdowns. You just haven't got to the backlog yet. Maybe. Also expect prosecutors to oppose their release on bail, ensure the public safety is prioritized. Well, that's the thing. Are we going to see two-tier policing? To ensure that justice delivers swiftly, prosecutors will prioritize such cases ahead of existing investigations in order by accused before the court of their opportunity, said, and blah, 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 blah. Far right is evil and we have to take them down. But if it's the leftists that promote racism and Jew hatred like they've done for weeks, it's okay. But I actually want to talk about the actual right-wing movement because you've heard the left talk about what they've been saying. I'm going to show you something about what the pro-UK rally's been saying because the pro-UK rally has been organised by a man called Glasgow Cabby. That's what he's called on social media. I don't know his actual name. But when it comes to what his events have been, they've actually been really peaceful. There hasn't been any problems with them. I've actually witnessed 3 of them, I believe. I haven't been able to see all of them because I haven't just been motivated enough to go and do it because I'm like, surely there's enough people in places like Glasgow and Edinburgh where these issues have been concerned. There's people there. I don't need to be there because it's a lot of money, especially back then when all these events were going on. But Glasgow Cabby's been responsible for probably most successful peaceful protests. That's why I'm finding it just a bit odd they calling it Enough is Enough, where it's actually linked to Lord Voldemort's name, and that's where the lies and the misinformation get in everywhere. It just gets messy so fast. And Glasgow Cabby, I would say out of all the protests I've seen him make sure he can do, they've all been peaceful. Maybe there's been a few good ones. He's been responsible for what I'm showing the photos and pictures here of the gender bill protest, where they were actually protesting outside of Parliament to the gender reform bill, the one where, women can go into prisons. He's done ones that's against the Glasgow ULEZ zones, or low emission zone, but the main one that started off was in Glasgow. Now they implemented every other city. Now he's been the one who's been organizing all these events, which I, like I say again, I do find it odd he's using that name, but enough is enough is actually a name that is making more grounds to be more than just a right-wing fascist movement. It is enough of this absolute BS that we see in the country every day, and we're just told not to look at it. There's a lot of people getting told just to shut up. And I think this is when we're seeing the culture change. What I want to show you is this little bit longer video of Glasgow Cabby talking to Together. Together has been the people who were actually against the lockdowns back in a few years ago now, where Glasgow Cabby was talking about what his concerns are about what was going on in Glasgow for the US zone, what's the possibilities, and then we can get back to it.
I can tell you I'll not be in a position to afford a £70,000 cab, so unless I can come up with some magic plan or idea or something more affordable, then I could very possibly be leaving the taxi trade. Well, if we begin losing our cab drivers, you begin losing pubs. And if you lose cabs and you lose pubs and you lose restaurants, the economy is on the slide. We're in a bad enough position just now in Glasgow. Glasgow's fell into a dilapidated state, and that comes from a guy who loves the city dearly. I've always earned my money in Glasgow, I've always stayed in Glasgow. I thoroughly enjoy my work as a Glasgow taxi driver. But such is the condition of Glasgow now, it's pretty well disgusting. It's control of government. We feel, or tens of thousands of people feel, this is just another control of government. This wasn't voted upon, and people say that we live in a democracy. I don't feel that we live in a democracy. We live in a subdued society where we are under control of government.
Right, so now you've seen that, I actually want to show you a recent update that came up from him himself and many other people who have been promoting this. There's been people I've interviewed personally, Alistair McConaughey that runs the Force for Good, Niall Fraser, who's been part of the Scottish Family Party. They've been asked to do speaking at this event, so it'd be interesting to see them together. I would like to see these people in person. I've actually interviewed these people themselves, and we all have an idea this is going to be a trap, basically, and the idea is to get as much right-wing people in jail as possible, so I'm going to be super careful I don't get too much trouble. I'm just going to be journalist. I'm not going to try and say anything just because there's no point. The agitators will try and agitate, and it's not fun trying to be on the other end of that. It's not fun trying to do other things too. But let's go and look at the comments or the recently post stuff said here about the protest. Join at George Square 1 p.m. with our guest speakers and pipe at the start of the day. Now, that's a little point I want to mention. They want to bring the saltires, they want to bring the Little Lion flags, they want to bring UK flags, they want to bring George crosses, because they want to celebrate Britishness and they want to stand up against what the nationalists have done, is made the Scottish flag toxic to like. That's why I don't like the Scottish flag, by the way. The peaceful rallies against the UK government's mass and illegal immigration policies, which I believe are now having a detrimental effect on the vast majority of people in the UK, which is very true. Over 1.2 million people came over the world and live in the UK last year. Approximately 40,000 of these people are entering. These illegal migrants entering the country are now costing the UK taxpayers somewhere of the region of £10 million a day to keep them comfortable in hotels across the country, which we believe would be gross misuse of taxpayers' money. And I think every other country with common sense would see that as well. But the SNP would like to bring more immigrants up here because we just don't have enough people. They just don't have enough. It's not like England's got a problem and now half their cities don't look like England anymore. Funny that. They really want to implement that in Scotland too. It's mad. Says that for nationalists as well. Many politicians, including Sir Keir Starmer, the twat, and most sections of the media have in turn called anyone in their opinion on immigration in the UK a far-right violent extremist, which is true, they have done it, or racist or fascist thugs, which is inaccurate. as well as utterly disgraceful and scandalous. This is extremely damaging for the people, damaging to the good people of this once fantastic country. This is why I want everyone to make sure they understand when it comes to this. They have no intention of making violence happen. We do not condone any of the violence or riots which we saw throughout British media following the atrocities which took place in Southport in England, where 3 young girls were brutally murdered and many more injured in a horrific knife attack, which no one seems to be talking about anymore. We make it very clear, plain and simple, we are peaceful. And there's a good track record of it. Group of people who want no conflict or confirmation with any counter protest on the day or march publicly rally. We fully condemn all acts of aggression or violence and will share several anti-racism banners and placards on the day of our rally. So we should be on the same page, where we have the same accomplished speakers on our support to listen on the day. We welcome anyone of any race or religion to join us on the day, as long as you value, support, respect the people of our reasons of gathering to demonstrate in Glasgow city centre. Our children matter most. Thank you, the organisers. Now, I want to make sure that is very clear. They have no intention to get rioting and get angry. It's easy to manipulate people to say enough is far-right bigotry, because you've got the Lord Voldemort coming up as well, if it's true. If it's not, it's fine, but if it is, it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen, because he's getting painted as the far-right thug, and we're all going to get painted as thugs anyway, even if you aren't. So I'm going to say that's what is going to be happening. I'll be very interested to see what will happen, but I have to tell you, one side's going to tell the truth, one side's going to lie, and no matter what your bias is, something's going to change history in Glasgow.